Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Raphael Sachs. I'm presenting a paper on the behalf of a past PhD student whose name is Filippo Bosti. Filippo worked with Professor Maria Antonietta Esposito at the University of Firenze. It was a great pleasure to work with them, and we hosted Filippo for 6 months at the Technion during the period of his PhD. He also took part in the summer school in Oslo. And I will try to do my level best to present it in the way that he would like it to be presented, although I do admit that airport design is not my forte. Of course, I'll be happy to answer questions afterwards, but if you... Right, let's get straight to it. So what we're talking about here is really a refinement of lean design for the specific case of airports and airport terminals. And I think that similar to other areas of functional buildings, airports are unique in the fact that we as passengers are both product and consumer. So you may think that we get value as consumers from the services that the airport provides us, but we're also the product moving through it. And so the concepts of flow, work in progress, cycle time, etc. apply directly to each and every one of us as we move through an airport. And so that creates an interesting dichotomy where we can, instead of looking at waste in design process, we can rather turn it around and say value and flow are the drivers, value for the passenger, flow of the passenger. So we're going to be talking about, really it's about architecture and architectural design and how airports are put together, not only in the initial phase, but also through their lifetime, because they undergo a great deal of change and renovation as systems change, occupants change in terms of shops and other things. It's a design science research project, and what I'm going to focus on here are these: the challenges for the industry, to provide a little background, the airport terminal design and passenger experience, what are those design drivers and what are the criteria, how we can implement lean in airport design, in terminal design specifically, what's the contribution to knowledge, and then we'll define who the targets or the potential benefactors of the research are and where this is going right now. I should mention already that what you will hear here is the principles, the process that's been designed. It's currently although Filippo has completed his PhD, he now works for the Florence Airport, and they're undergoing a major redevelopment in which he is leading the design management and testing out a lot of these principles as he goes along. So, policies have changed in air travel, and so there are open sky policies in many countries which allow many airlines the freedom to travel between many points of departure and arrival. The air traffic forecasts, I will tell you what they say here. The map that you can see is the European Union, plus some other countries, and the color scaling is telling you how much airport travel or airline travel is expected to grow in the next period. And so the forecasts are that the number of flights, on average, will grow by 2% over the next foreseeable future per year. And when you add that up, you can see that in 2040, there will be 53% more flights than there are today. So this is, although it's 2% per annum, of course, it accumulates very quickly. That means much more demand, not only for flights in general, but also for long-haul flights, and therefore bigger aircraft, more passengers, and much bigger terminals than we have now, 50% more. Of course, the demand growth will be much greater in countries that today are less developed, and lower in countries that already do have thoroughly implemented air travel. And there are two other challenges: the regulations, technical references, in terms of specifications. These first two deal with capacity and quality, but these two deal with project integration and project compliance. And from the point of view of an airport designer or a system designer, these are all challenges that they have to meet. When we think of an airport project in that sense, then we need to think about the project participants, and there are many and very varied. It's not only the passengers and stakeholders. We also have bureaucracies, passport control, police systems, airlines, commercial ventures within the airport management systems themselves, ground transport systems, and so on. All of those have different requirements and different ownerships and different contractual identities, and so they all require, they all have demands on the airport design. So what's the problem with the current situation in terms of design and design management? There are, as I've shown you, major challenges that are mainly associated with lack of capacity to meet growing demand. There are many wastes during project development and during operations, as I'm sure many of you have discovered, to your chagrin while traveling. Many project development phases, not only development phases for new terminals, but during renovations and reconfigurations of existing terminals. There is not, as those who study the airline industry and airport terminal design, as the research unit at Florence University does focus solely on, stakeholders do not necessarily know how to express their requirements. And of course, we know that from many areas of research of lean design. Ineffective communication, project design changes, rework, lacking project information, information missing in design, lack of integration between information belonging to different disciplines, unbalanced resource allotments to design teams, and of course ineffective document delivery and control. And probably we could continue the list, and it would not be that different from standard design practices that we meet, which have perhaps not been introduced to lean design processes. And so the result is that it's very common in airport design for architectural firms and engineering firms, unless it's a signature architecture, but certainly even when it is a signature architecture, take on the layout of the functional areas of the terminal and copy-paste from previous projects, as most people do in case-based design anyway, adapting to the new geometry of the new building. We can think of it like this. If we think of the conceptual world above and the empirical practical world below, then we can compare what we might call a lean mindset to the existing airport industry, AECO being architecture, engineering, construction and owners, contractors and owners. And so of course in a lean mindset on the right-hand side we have lean design management, but then we have here waste reduction and value delivery, whereas here we're showing project quality delivery being the main current driver and design process, and the client really at the focus. And there are strong links in literature and practice that you can find, but the research gap that Filippo identified fairly early on was that really there's a strong contrast between project quality and costs, but mainly quality. On the one hand, it's design drivers, and value on the other hand. Very little focus, if any, on the value to passengers and the value of passengers. And at the same time, lean design management as a counterpoint to a standard traditional design process. So from that, there are two working hypotheses behind the work. One, that implementing lean principles in design drivers improves driver quality perception. And second, that it should be possible to develop a customizable and flexible process for airport project development that implements lean principles. So the research is really trying to apply lean design ideas in this specific area. The values, of course, are constructability, levels of service, flexibility, minimum service disruption. The clients, the main clients, are the airport owners and passengers. The others, I mentioned a long list of them before, and I'm not going to repeat it. And so the scope goes toward defining a methodology, connecting people, process, and technology, and then trying to implement this in the real world. Some basic definitions, which I will leave you here to read on the left, but perhaps, again, the passenger themselves, the passenger, him or herself, is the service consumer, as I said. But we define something called the passenger experience, what the passenger experiences as the consumed product, and that's the thing that should drive design. Design should be focused on improving or optimizing the passenger experience, which should increase value. And the key, optimizing passenger flows rather than optimizing the activities that are done at any particular checkpoint along the process. The research methodology that's been adopted is literature analysis and then mapping of common practices, in other words, existing practices, but then a lean practices interaction matrix, which is so far the key contribution, leading to updating lean airport design drivers, a new supported process, and then of course going to field tests and results, which will come once he has learned more about how this can actually work. And again, the main two drivers, enhancement of passenger experience and diffusion of knowledge. So I'll just show you briefly the lean principles practices interaction matrix. This is an attempt to lay out the design process step by step and then different lean design practices. That's being done, the map exists, you can find it in the paper and as supplementary material, but really what it's doing is taking lean design practices along the top, the different stages of airport design along the left, and then highlighting what can be done. And there are all in all 100 and something potential point improvements, but they all wrap up into a more comprehensive approach. The main idea, again, to sum up, lower the traveler's anxiety curve by providing efficient and stress-free processing as products. Don't waste their time. Avoid changes, avoid signage differences, etc. I'm just going to pick up on two things to give you an idea of how this is different. Here, and I apologize for the text size, and I will be just one more moment. Common airport design practices, for example, de Neufville and other design guides, they optimize for space programs. Here, the idea is to optimize passenger experience, which is quite a different idea. In terms of design goals, passenger processing activities, check-in, luggage, etc., are the current designs. Here we want to focus on passenger process flow, or passenger flow. So this is aimed, of course, at academics, at researchers of design in general, researchers of airport design in particular, and of course at clients, at airport management companies who might drive design processes. And the future areas, the one that I want to pick up on and leave you with and emphasize is the field test, which is currently ongoing. And with any luck in Dublin, we will have more to say about it.